The Nile River, a source of life for centuries, is at the center of a complex dispute. One of the longest rivers in the world, stretches over 4,000 miles, form the Blue Nile and the White Nile. It flows through 11 African countries, but it is the section between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia that has been the center of recent disputes. The Nile River features as the gift. For Egypt, this river known as the Gift of the Nile heavily relies on the river for irrigation, agriculture, and its people's livelihoods. Sudan, located downstream from Ethiopia, benefits from the Nile's water for agriculture and hydroelectric power generation. Ethiopia, the source of the Blue Nile, seeks to harness the river's power for its own development through the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam.
Back to the history, in the early 1900s, the formation of the Nile Water Agreement 1929 concluded between Egypt and Great Britain that allocated the majority of the Nile River water to Egypt and a smaller portion to Sudan. This dominance was solidified in 1959 with the Nile Water Agreement established between Egypt and Sudan increased water allocation to both states. It insists on water rights granted to Egypt, disallowing any construction project undertaken on the Nile River without prior approval from Cairo. After the signing of the Nile Water Agreement in 1929 and 1959, which primarily favored Egypt and Sudan, tensions shimmered beneath the surface for decades.
Fast forward to 2010, Ethiopia announced plans for a giant dam project, namely the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This raises Egypt's concerns, fearing reduced water flow. Despite these worries, construction begins in 2011, creating a big tension between these three countries. In 2019, tensions around the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam significantly worsened after multiple failed negotiation attempts in previous years. The dam, a symbol of Ethiopia's ambitions for economic development and energy generation. In an attempt to resolve the Nile Dam dispute, the international community stepped in around late 2019. The United States, with its strong diplomatic and financial ties with Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, took a leading role. Talks were overseen by the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mckin, aiming to create a legally binding agreement on the filing and operation of the CURD. The core objective was to ensure a predictable and stable water supply for both Egypt and Sudan. Key areas of negotiation included establishing a timetable for filling the dam's massive reservoir that wouldn't significantly reduce its water flow during droughts. Additionally, they aimed to define clear operating rules for Ethiopia to manage water release throughout the year. Finally, the agreement ideally would include a mechanism for resolving any future dispute that might arise regarding interpretation or implementation.
However, the US-led mediation faced significant challenges further complicating matters as Ethiopia perceived the proposed agreement as biased toward Egypt, restricting its control over the dam. This dissatisfaction led Ethiopia to withdraw from the final round of talks in the early 2020, causing the US-led mediation to fall short of a lasting agreement. Fearing an escalation into a wider international conflict, Egypt pushed for the involvement of the United Nations Security Council. However, a spirit of regional ownership prevailed. Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia agreed to let the African Union to lead the mediation, hoping for an African solution to African problems. South Africa, holding the AU chairmanship in 2020, facilitated numerous rounds of talks. The AU aimed to hammer out a binding agreement that will address the water security concerns of Egypt and Sudan, while acknowledging Ethiopia's development needs.
Despite their renewed efforts, the AU's mediation achieved limited success. Ethiopia remained wary of any mechanism perceived as restricting its control over the dam. Years of stalled negotiation had fostered a climate of mistrust, making consensus difficult. In 2021, the AU preserved the initial momentum seemed to wane. While negotiations continued, no binding agreement was reached on the CURD's filing and operation. The lack of progress left the core issue unresolved and future tensions simmering beneath the surface. From 2019 to 2021, both the US and the AU worked to mediate the Nile Dam dispute. While these efforts prevented a complete breakdown in communications, a lasting agreement remained elusive. The concern of Ethiopia about water security and Egypt's fears of a reduced Nile flow remain unsolved, highlighting the need for renewed commitment and creative solutions for sustainable water sharing. In the pre-mediation phase, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan must agree to participate. The African Union, led by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, took over mediation due to Ethiopia's concern about US bias. The agenda covers goods legality, water availability, and solutions. South Africa set ground rules based on key principles, which is equitable water use without harm, equal river use rights with a focus on fairness, and water security principle to cover rights and address harm. During the Great Mediation, negotiation strategies were guided by international agreements and customary law evolving from treaties, state practice, and court decisions. Key agreements include the 1997 UN Waterways Convention, the 1992 UN ECE Watercourses Convention, and the 2004 Berlin Rules. International law requires assessing transboundary harm, notifying affected states, and consulting in good faith. Principle reinforced by the ICJ in the Lake Leonard case. Third, not signatories, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan must follow these customary law duties. The Great Mediation faced challenge due to differing interests. Ethiopia sees the term as crucial for economic growth and energy, while Egypt and Sudan worry about water supply and agriculture impacts. This led to disagreements over interpreting international agreements, meeting procedural obligations, and balancing equitable water use. Assessing the alternative and ensuring compliance with agreements were also significant hurdles. Navigating these issues required careful negotiation to find a mutually acceptable resolution. In 2020, the African Union proposed a draft agreement to resolve GERD dispute, including cooperation, filing plans, operation rule, dispute resolution, and monitoring. Egypt and Sudan raised objections, leading to ongoing negotiations. A new mediation proposal includes a quarter of the AU, EU, UN, and the US, led by the AU Chair President Felix Tshisekedi. Reaching an agreement requires consensus from all parties, including Ethiopia, aiming for a long-term satisfactory solution.
First, let's dive into who want to reopen the case and why. Egypt and Sudan are at the forefront of effort to reopen discussion about Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Their primary concern is water security. For Egypt, the Nile provides almost all of its fresh water, essential for agriculture, drinking water, and the overall economy. A significant reduction in the river flow could lead to several water shortages and economic hardship. Similarly, Sudan relies heavily on the Nile for its agricultural and domestic water needs. Any changes in the river flow could impact millions of people dependent on this vital resource. Where was the case brought? The dispute has been presented in multiple international forums. The African Union has taken the lead in facilitating negotiation, recognizing the importance of an African-led solution to African problems. Additionally, the United Nations Security Council has also been approached, reflecting the global significance of this issue. In recent months, Egypt and Sudan have been advocating for more robust international intervention. They are pushing for the UNSC to play a more active role in ensuring a legal binding agreement that addresses their concerns about water security and fair usage. Now, let's explore the mechanism used during the reopening of the case. The primary mechanism has been mediated negotiation. The African Union has been instrumental in bringing the parties to the table, fostering dialogue and finding a mutually acceptable solution. These mediated talks are crucial in addressing the technical and political aspect of the dispute. Beyond negotiation, Egypt and Sudan have considered a legal appeals to international bodies. These appeals aim to seek arbitration or a binding resolution that will enforce fair management of the dam operation and ensure their water rights are protected.
What is Ethiopia's reaction to the reopening of the case of Nile Dam dispute? Ethiopia's reaction to the reopening of the Nile Dam dispute has been marked by a mixture of determination and calls for a continued negotiation. The country remains committed to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project, emphasizing its importance for national development and regional cooperation. For instance, Ethiopia has expressed its readiness to engage in negotiations with Egypt and Sudan to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. The Ethiopian government emphasized a negotiated settlement, showing willingness to participate in ongoing talks facilitated by the international bodies like the African Union. Now, let's talk about the current status of the dam. Ethiopia has completed the first and final filing of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam reservoir as of September 2023, marking a significant milestone in the project. This development occurred despite ongoing opposition from Egypt and Sudan, who are concerned about the dam's impact on their water supplies and have called for a legally binding agreement on its filing and operation. Recent negotiations in Cairo did not result in any substantial agreement, but further talks are scheduled to take place in Addis Ababa later in 2024. Ethiopia has remained firm on the necessity of the dam for its national development and electrification efforts, while Egypt and Sudan continue to express concerns over the unilateral actions taken by Ethiopia. Last but not least, after they decided to reopening the case of the Nile Dam dispute, they also need to face with several impacts that might affect their relations, especially Ethiopia and Egypt. The reopening of the Nile Dam dispute has significantly impacted the relations between Ethiopia and Egypt. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam remains a highly contentious issue, with both nations asserting their stakes vigorously. Reopening the case of Nile Dam affects the relations between those countries, which has strained the relations between Egypt and Ethiopia. the diplomatic dialogue has intensified with mutual accusations between Egypt and Ethiopia in the reason of economic and environmental concerns for both countries, as Egypt relies on water for fresh water. On the other hand, Ethiopia sees the dam as a crucial for economic development.